students as well. I remember as a gay man sitting in university and even sitting in high school, feeling very isolated and talked about. People would talk about me, with theories about who I am and that sort of thing. I try and humanize my my lectures, and I try and I reach out to students and I let them know that they can come and talk to me.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of 18th Avenue Podcast. I am your host, Rico Bottles, and today joining me here is a very, very special guest.
My name is David Aveline, and I teach sociology at Mount Royal University.
And co-hosted beside me today is
Keira Carter.
So we're going to get this show started. Dr. David, I want to thank you so much for being on this platform and giving us a chance to sit here with you and share this space with you.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks very much, Rico.
Thank you. So let's get started. We want to go right from the beginning. There's so much, you have so much life experiences, not just in now, but from before you got into the field that you're in now. So I want you to take us back very quickly here. Let the people know who we're here with today.
Okay, well, it's interesting. When I was in grammar school and high school, I did terribly, with a lot of Fs and things like that. Back in those days, that was in the 1960s, they did not know anything about dyslexia. And I was a dyslexic child, and they just simply thought I was stupid. And I think I internalized that because, I never pursued higher education for quite a while. Once I finished high school, I went from job to job to job to job. I was a underground miner. I was a racetrack groom. I sold shoes at one point. But at the age of 33, I decided, I've had enough of this. I need to go somewhere. So I said, I'll take a couple of courses in school. And I just kept on going for 12, 13 years and came out with a PhD. I found out that in spite of dyslexia, it is overcomable, if that's a word. And, I was able to do well, and pull off a lot of A's and everything else just by studying harder and this sort of thing. So at that point, I got, 3.5 years to a bachelor's in Montreal, 3 years for a master's in Montreal, Concordia University, and then I went to Indiana University. I was very interested in human sexuality, and at one point there was a sex researcher. His name was Dr. Martin Weinberg, and he was in Montreal, and I started talking to him, and I expressed my interest in sexuality. Because I was an older student, he thought I was important, but I wasn't. I was just, but he thought I was the head of the department, so he was all nice to me and everything, but he found out I was a student, and he invited me down to go and study with him at Indiana University. It's home to the Kinsey Institute for sex research, and I had really quite a wonderful experience, living in the United States for 7 years, then 5 years at the University of Cincinnati as a professor, and 18 years at Mount Royal University here in Calgary. So that's my life story. That's 50 years in about 2 minutes.
Yeah. We really do appreciate that, and thank you so much for sharing it with us. Just going back, and I'm sure many people can relate to that, being in school, and because of the way things were, teachers not really taking time to cater to individual students. That must have been a tough thing.
It was a tough thing because, I'd internalized the fact that I was stupid. There was no such thing as dyslexia in the 1950s and early 1960s. So I was in the remedial reading class. Children would make fun of me and got into a couple of fights in the schoolyard. I won those fights.
That's great.
Yeah, which is good. Once I discovered the word dyslexia, it just opened up a world for me. It just sort of changed my whole image of myself. But yeah, it was tough. It was tough. I mean, teachers were very strict in those days, and I was not expelled. I was suspended a few times, and all this sort of thing. So yeah, but other than that, it was a good education in many ways. I learned to write back then. I learned all about Canada. Although back in those days, when we learned about history, it was incredibly biased. For example, we talking about the Indigenous people in the 1950s. When I learned about Canadian history, it was all about the nice, benevolent Jesuit priests who came to Canada to civilize, the Indigenous people, and they were ingrateful and killed them and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And that's what I learned. That with the absolute popularity of cowboy and Indian movies and series like that, it really sort of was a very biased history in those days. But I think we've learned a lot back since then.
You say you discovered, dyslexia, and my follow-up question would be, when did this word, what's the history of this word, and when did you first discover and realize, okay, this could really be a condition, not that I'm a stupid person, but rather that...
I don't think there was any one incident. Mm-hmm. It was a slow realization. Once I solidly defined myself as dyslexic, then I understood why I would miss certain things, and this sort of thing, or get things exactly backwards, and I still do that. Mm-hmm. I don't think there was any one incident, but it did change my life, and this was in my mid to late 20s when I found that out. But I didn't really. I had a father that encouraged me to quit high school and go out and get a job, for example, and. I think a lot of my students are fortunate, but they're raised by people who really put an emphasis upon university education. My parents did not do that. Go out, get a job. If your boss yells at you, take it because you need the job, and this sort of thing. I had a lot of those jobs for a while. Eventually, I think going to school. Education is the key. I mean, it sounds corny, but it really sort of changed my life entirely. And now I enjoy life. I mean, I teach in Mount Royal University. Right now I'm sitting at my desk, because of the COVID thing. But I enjoy my job. I enjoy being with students. I enjoy being with 20-year-olds. It's fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Keira, do you have a question?
Oh, I was just thinking, so when you first started going to university and stuff, you didn't know, you didn't have an exact plan in mind of where you were going to go. You just started taking courses and one thing led to another. And... Yeah,
people say, well, why did you take sociology? Mm-hmm. And I think I almost pulled it out of a hat. I thought not psychology. I don't want to take psychology. Okay. Too many people take psychology. So what else is there? Well, there's sociology. Okay. Well, so I took 2 courses. That's it. I was a part-time student. Next year I was a full-time student. and I took every sociology course that I could possibly find, as well as some literature courses and all sorts of other things. I mean, for somebody age 33 who had just been say working as a shoe salesman, for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, your brain just sort of is on hold.
Right.
And you come home, you maybe watch a couple of programs on television, and and suddenly I'm dealing in school with ideas, with concepts, with world events, and this was fascinating to me. I always felt, how far can I go? I don't think I can, I hope that I get a bachelor's, it's going to be so hard, but, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and, and I found out that I can do it. So.
Oh, that's really cool.
That's amazing. So I have another question for you here. Study how we are socialized, and from what I know, family is a huge agent of socialization.
Yes.
The question I have for you is, could you tell us the impact that your family had on your childhood?
As I say, my family, I was raised by a single mother. She was a wonderful woman, very sacrificing, but, she worked as a waitress, which we now call a server, for the longest time. And, at that point, in those days, she worked 12 hours a day in high heels, which, it's got to be hard. But her emphasis upon what we should do with our lives, that's my brother and I, we should basically just, as soon as possible, finish high school, get a job, stay there, be nice to the boss, suck up to the boss, and, keep that job for years. And if you're lucky, then you might get a little bit of secure. But no, I mean, university was just not in our vocabulary. At the same time, we had a nice close family. I was raised by my mother and grandmother. Mother worked, our grandmother took care of us, and it was an untroubled childhood, so that was nice. But I think that idea of college is not for you, because nobody in our family ever thought of going to college was kind of internalizing me, and when I graduated high school, I was actually the first one in my family to do so, let alone getting a PhD. So
Wow, that's very incredible. I like that story a lot. Now, at what point do you think, from your own experience, because things have changed now from the 50s, how things used to be, and I understand from my own little understanding is that you have, back then that was kind of like the way to do things. It's like, go to work, get a job, because there was that guarantee that your entire family would go through the same sequence or work for the same guide until it was over.
Exactly. You tend to do what your parents do. Now, just to say, there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I think particularly today during COVID, I have great admiration for the people that deliver, for people that work in food, for people who work in essential services, and I think a lot of us have a newfound respect because they're keeping us going. If we didn't have supermarkets, society would be disastrous. We didn't have people processing the food. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with good, honest work. But at one point, I wanted to stop having a job and start having a career. And so the difference is, a career is like part of your identity of who you are and what you do. If you're going to become a lawyer, eventually you get to look at yourself as I'm a lawyer,
right?
Kind of thing. Yeah.
I was just thinking how, it's interesting you talked about how back when you were in school, even the way they taught history was, very different, how it was very biased negatively towards the Indigenous people. And I think there are a lot of people who might have grown up in those same, schools and environments, but they fall back on that now, like, oh, it was just the times, that's just how we saw. So what do you think, like, for you it was that made you, like, challenge those ideas and, like...
Yeah. I guess education, which brings out awareness. As I say, if you were working, 12 hours a day in a really hard job, you don't have time to think about these things. You watch the news on TV, you go, that's a shame. But, if one thing, sociology teaches us to think upward and connect things. So you might see, a single event on the news on television, but, your mind would be connected to an overall pattern in society. I'm sorry, I've talked and I've lost sight of the question.
That's good.
Exactly. Now you're asking, it's an era. It's interesting, baby boom. There are a lot of baby boomers who are really quite reactionary. There's always the freaky uncle who's supposed to be at Thanksgiving saying, kind of thing, right? One of the things that I'm really encouraged by is the millennials as well as the echo boomers, who are very aware of these issues. Now, whether that's because I'm in university and I'm sheltered and I only see college students, maybe that'd be the case. But I think there's much greater awareness of things like microaggressions, which I've certainly had. All of my life, not for a long time, but as a gay man, I've certainly gotten light, microaggressions, excuse me, but I've seen a lot of progress with a lot of things, but I think we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we have made progress. Even just when you're talking about like dyslexia and not knowing that not being a word, like I think it's easy for me to take for granted just that, so much research and thought has been put into these things. Yeah, like exactly. For me, like, if I was to have dyslexia, people would know what it is. Like teachers now, like obviously there are still pockets where people are overlooking different students, but it would be a lot greater chance of it getting, noticed early by a teacher or someone, the resources to help me be
exactly.
And on the line of microaggression, I often wonder if this is something that we can somewhat overcome, and how do we do so?
That's an interesting thing. I think, people of color, GLBTQ people, they get this stuff all the time, right? People with accents get this stuff all the time, they say that if you're not, if you don't speak up, you're part of the problem, not the solution, right? So, but that's really a nice ideal, and I think we're very nice for all of us to speak up at every microaggression we get. What do you mean by that? Etc. But that's difficult. That's it's difficult for a lot of people. You might be in a situation where if you speak up, it's going to make things a lot worse. Or that sort of thing. So I think, when people are sort of, get this mild insult, that says that somebody has racial bias or they're homophobic or even transphobic, it's difficult to speak up. I mean, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. There we go.
And that's just the foundation of things.
Yeah, exactly.
So, it's gonna have to move along here pretty quickly. Right. So much to cover. Just going back to your job, in terms of the experiences you had early on, before going to school. I guess you've done all kinds of stuff. Anything from dish digger, security guards, farmhand, racetrack groom, underground miner. You said that already. Hotel desk clerk, and shoe salesman. You've been all over the place.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, my question to you is, how was your experience with the variety of cultural impact on your research and personal life relationship?
You basically, with all those jobs, you think, oh, geez, I was wasting my time. I should have gone to school earlier. But, it gave me a background in life, in that I know what it's like to work. I know what it's like to have an abusive boss. I know what it's like to be tired, and just counting the minutes before you can punch the clock out again. So I think that was a benefit for me, not only in terms of sociology, and having a sense of Canada, etc., but in terms of being well-rounded in life. I worked for a very sleazy hotel once, and saw fights every single night. I was like behind the desk, and it was $18 a night. At the end, all the drunken people would basically put down their $18 and go up and sleep it off. It's a rough job. So was mining. It was a rough job. Working in a pretty rough town back in those days, and up in Thompson, Manitoba. So.
And were you at that mining job for a very long time?
8 months, maybe. Yeah, exactly. About 8 months. It was interesting. I was having steak for breakfast every morning. So steak and eggs, and I was a trim 130 pounds and very muscular because, it's just absolute backbreaking work back then. But, everybody should go down in a mine. See, it's amazingly dark. You have a light on top of your head. But if you go around the corner and you turn it off, it's the darkest dark you've ever seen in your life. The total absence of light.
And that brings up my next question. Actually, safety is a huge thing now, even within the oil patch. What was your experience what was safety like back then? And did you have any fear going to work every day?
No, not really. I got used to it. Okay. The very fact that you're in an elevator with a 3,000-foot drop. You got 40 men and you're going down to my level, which is 1,200. The fact that below the floor is 3,000-foot drop. But you don't think about those things. Some people had a lot of accidents back then, but they didn't adhere to the safety rules or and that sort of thing. Worked with a lot of explosives down there.
No, I would just say it sounds like working all those different jobs and working with a variety of people, like what you're saying, it gave you that experience with working with others, and also kind of links to sociology in a way. It does. To see all these different pockets of people and whatnot.
It does. When I was working, let's say it's the shoe store, all I was thinking about was shoes and making a sale and that sort of thing. Once I learned Marxian Theory, which is all about exploitation of the workers. It has to be adjusted for the 21st century, but it certainly made sense for the mid-19th century, right? The very fact that, Marx said that all of our talents should be fulfilled. You should be a hunter, you should be a fisher, you should be a poet, you should be a singer, you should be, any talent you have, you should have time to develop, and that's when you're fully fulfilled. Well, if you're working 12 hours a day and everything that comes out of your mouth has to do with a shoe, 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, you get a little bit numb, after the longest time. So, I was able to look back at my experience and sort of connect it to the theories that I was learning, for example. So, that was, in that way, I sort of looked at having such jobs in a positive way,
Yeah, I think that's. Thank you for sharing that with us. Moving into your professional life, one of the things that is just out there is this, and I'm sure a lot of professors get this too. Mm-hmm. But for you especially, it almost seems like every student online or that has ever taken your course have been able to maintain this good rapport with you. And like just to kind of quote something I found online is like by far one of the best prof at MRU.
Oh my god, that website.
Right?
Exactly.
He cares a lot about the success of his students, and that's a beautiful thing for students to have that kind of thing. Where do you think that idea or that value that you've been able to just now trust in your students, but also trust in your course and giving that confidence to anyone else who take your course, where do you think that comes from?
I believe, in general, in being a nice person. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's the first thing. I don't like making people feel uncomfortable, and sometimes I might get mad at somebody in a road rage thing, but I generally don't like making people feel uncomfortable. I look at the value of people. I put myself in their place. There are some students that, try and manipulate you and pull the wool over your eyes. And they say their grandmother died when they haven't, they're lying to you. But I kind of think that's very uncommon. I think when students are stressed and they come up to you, I think it's my job to try and reduce that stress. Why? Because I'm a teacher. I'm not going to say, well, that's life, and that's it. But I think caring about students, caring about them as human beings, is first and foremost. Other than that, I try and make my material that I teach interesting. I have respect for students as well. I remember as a gay man sitting in university and even sitting in high school, feeling very isolated and talked about. People would talk about me, with theories about who I am and that sort of thing. I try and humanize my lectures, and I try and I reach out to students and I let them know that they can come and talk to me. I think a lot of professors at Mount Royal University are like that. It's just a wonderful school. I mean, we are a caring bunch, but it's respect for people. That I think maybe that's it. I don't know. Maybe it's not for me to say. Keira, why am I such a wonderful professor?
Right.
Yeah. So there we go. Another thing that might be interesting is that when you get a fresh PhD, you are absolutely thrilled, as I was. My God, I'm now can call myself a doctor.
Right.
But a colleague of mine, Tim, he wrote articles. He's doing research on working class professors. Mm-hmm. Professors that first time going to university, and what they have, a lot of professors in the beginning have what's called the imposter syndrome. Okay, here I am, a professor. I'm amongst all these eminent, very, very smart people. I hope they don't realize it's really me. I'm not really a professor. Mm-hmm. And that sort of thing. So you have an imposter syndrome. It goes away with years of experience. You begin to develop an identity. But a lot of professors do have that. Anyway, back to your thing. Just teach well, have respect for people, and just be a nice person. My students say that I'm funny, and I thought, really, I don't know. I don't go for tell joke here or something like that.
Right.
But, I don't know. I like to look at life positively and that sort of thing. I'm the type of person in my condo. I'll say good morning to people with the mailbox. And half the time they just look at me and say, who the hell is this person talking to me, kind of thing. But I'll continue to do that because that's the way people should be in life.
I like that.
Yeah.
Keira, you got something for me?
Oh, no, I just, going off of what you're saying about, you and being a professor and the values that you carry, one of the things that really stood out for me was, I remember I think it was last semester, there was that sort of issue with that one professor who made that comment, I think it was like something to do with the N-word, and there was like a whole sort of protest thing going on where they were like boycotting classes, I guess, and I remember at the time, you had given us like the day off of classes to participate in that, and then we were to write in an email about our experiences with oppression and whatnot. And I guess I noticed that not all my professors were comfortable taking like such a bold stance or taking any stance at all. So I was wondering what you think the experiences that you have that have contributed to you making like such a stance, and I guess what it's like when you're in those sort of situations where you could be over here and then your colleagues could be over there and sort of.
Yeah, it was about race, and I think a memo came down where we were to boycott classes. The classes will be boycotted for the very first day of class for this reason. Okay, so what am I going to do? Well, it's about race. I have an opportunity here. Now, I am, as a white guy, I'm not going to say, well, we should be nice to people, or this is what it's like, to feel things when you're a person of color. But I can facilitate, so I gave the students an opportunity to voice that, how they felt about these issues. And, most actually did. And once I got all of the comments, put them in a batch file and gave them back to you guys.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we could read everybody's.
Yeah, and a couple of students I had ongoing chats with, so that's nice. But giving people a voice as opposed to being their voice, kind of thing. I can be a voice in some ways, but I can't be a voice in terms of people of color because I'm not a person of color. So.
You often said throughout this interview that and made reference to you being a professor, a queer professor who teaches sexuality. My question to you is, what sort of experience, is it easier now to sort of be a professor and be queer to teach than it was back then?
It's much easier, and it's certainly much easier in Canada as opposed to Cincinnati, where a lot of my colleagues were homophobic. I mean, Cincinnati is one of the more conservative areas of the United States, right? And a lot of people didn't like the fact that I was openly gay, and they thought, well, it's irrelevant to the classroom. Well, I actually remember one person in Cincinnati, and she'd been working there for 35 years, and she said, I don't talk about my sexuality in the classroom, and she said this in front of a big faculty meeting, and I said to her, you mean in 35 years you've never mentioned the fact that you had a husband? She said, well, yes, I mentioned my husband, but I certainly wouldn't talk about my sexuality. She didn't connect the two at all, but what has your sexual orientation got to do with being in the classroom? I mean, particularly if you're teaching something like math or geology, right? I mean, well, a lot of professors talk about, might give an anecdote about what they did on vacation or whatever, and if you happen to have a same-sex partner, then you have to check that, or any sort of thing. So even math professors, have difficulties, and I do tell my students I'm gay when I teach sexuality. I don't. They probably know, but I don't with other classes. But with sexuality, it's relevant. It's gonna relate to how I talk to people. But I think in terms of LGBTQ people, people, queer people, it's much better than it was in the 1960s, and 70s. 1970s, I went to bars a lot, and all of my friends were gay men, 100%, absolutely all of my friends gay men. And at one point, I realized how very ghettoized that was. I'm with one kind of people, and so eventually, I would branch out. But I think it's the very fact that we have same-sex marriage here. My partner and I, Miguel, we were the very first. We were amongst, I believe, the first 1,000 to get married. When we did, it was legal in only 6 provinces. We had to go over to Vancouver to do it. But it's a different world for queer people than it was 50 years ago. So that's nice. That's nice. And in terms of having a gay professor, I really think students don't give a damn. It's just a non-issue to them. Like, hey, geez, I hope he doesn't. That kind of stuff. I've never come across that sort of thing.
What inspired you to take on sexuality as like a career path?
Yeah.
What inspired you to say, look, this is what I want to do, and this is where I want my PhD to be in, and to teach that? Because you could have done anything else in your life.
True. It's a very good question. Sociologists will specialize in lots and lots of other things. Lots of things. We have one specializing in gender, another one in disaster studies, another one, with something else. And I was the sexuality guy. It's a narrow area within sociology. It's an important one, but it is a narrow area. I suppose as a gay man, growing up, going through the 1970s, going through the HIV/AIDS era of the 1980s, and all of this sort of thing, that I had these questions, a burning desire to really study my own, perhaps myself, perhaps my community, perhaps my community's history, and all this sort of thing, and at least, my mentor, Martin Weinberg, in Indiana University, I found I found somebody that would foster that, so that was really good. My dissertation was, I talked to parents of gays, and what I found out was they have a coming out process if they have a gay son, just like the gay son does. So it's like this parallel thing, they would, admit at work that they had a gay son, which is, fine in, most parts of Canada, I guess, but, these people lived in Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, and, very, very conservative areas. I remember one dentist, for example, was very, very guarded about the fact that he had a gay son. He'd probably go out of business, small town, where was that? Kentucky. So anyway, I got off the track there. So
it's always good.
I guess so. You mentioned there. I was thinking, what is it like when you tell people that you're a sociologist of sexuality? It's like, do you feel like people it's not the same as saying, I'm a math professor?
Yeah, people make a joke. It's the first thing. You're studying sexuality. That kind of thing. And the joke is, that you're not really serious about it, but you're in it for your own, satisfaction somehow, or your own jollies, and so I think people who seriously study sexuality, and I don't really do that anymore, they basically form this subculture amongst each other. I mean, there are these wonderful conferences on sexuality, and so you have these people, and they're all studying some different parts of sexuality. This one's studying foot fetishism, that one's studying, lesbians who live in the Rocky Mountains and that sort of thing. But you can discuss sex without giggling about it or making a snarky joke or anything like this. As a scholarly vibe. But anybody else, it's sort of like a joke. I did have another mentor. Her name was Fran Shaver, and she studied prostitution in Canada for years. Now just retired, but she did say every time she told people she was studying prostitution, she would get a joke.
Right.
So it is. So it is stigmatized within academia to a certain extent. And that's one thing I have noticed. So you eventually stop saying that you study sexuality. So anyway, and they make people think, oh, you must be good at it or something like that. And no, it's an academic topic, and that's it.
Do you feel like this stigma is prevalent among other types of professors too, or is it more just people you might meet at a dinner party or people out in the street?
Sexuality stigma is certainly there. Other subdisciplines of sociology, I don't know. I'd have to think about that. Do you have an example or in your mind? Or?
I guess I just mean if you were at a meeting with other professors at a conference, let's say, of professors, and there's the math and sciences, the natural sciences professors there. Usually there's bias about there's the natural sciences, and then there's the social sciences. There's definitely a rivalry between social science and hard science. Mm-hmm.
And this is a great generalization, certainly not with anybody, but the idea is that hard science is real science, and social science is soft science, kind of thing. But one of my professors told me that human behavior is far more complicated than the behavior of the planets, because the behavior of the planets can be predicted mathematically. Human beings can't. There's too many variables there.
Yeah.
It's highly complex.
You do something very interesting going on to your method and your approach to how you do your research, how you find your subject. I find it very interesting because I do very similar thing.
Yes, you do. Exactly.
So this should be an interesting subject. So I want you to kind of walk us through that, because when I was reading this, I'm like, this is interesting. I guess my question to you is, number one, and I believe you did this primarily when you did your ghost stories and were trying to, So
and my dissertation research and other research as well. I love the interview, the semi-structured interview. I would say your interview of me is semi-structured. Put simply, if you do multiple regression analysis and statistical analysis, you're going to learn what and how much, and that's valuable. That's quite valuable, and you have good facts that people can actually make policies upon. But if you interview people and if you ask people about things, particularly people who have lived in a particular subworld, then you're going to learn the how and the why. And I think both are valid. There's the what and the how much. I like the how and the why, and so that's why I ask people. In ghosts, it's like, when's the first time you've seen a ghost? How did you feel? Did you actually see it? Was it in the corner of your eye and that sort of thing? But I do love the interview situation. I guess because I'm a social person, and I like sitting with people and having a cup of coffee and that sort of thing, just like you do. But Yeah, and I'd say your interview, it looks semi-structured to me. So, what I prefer, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you have this sort of connection because the idea of it, most people are nervous anyway when it comes to interview.
Oh, they are.
They're not sure what to say, what to do, and it's like, well, how do I sort of take that pressure off everyone in the room somehow, right? You stick a camera in the guy's face with the lights.
Yeah, exactly.
What has been the most interesting discovery, things that you discovered doing ghost stories?
I think the most interesting discovery has been myself. Now, to explain that, I started this research. There's something called grounded theory, and what that simply means is you walk into research making as few assumptions as possible. You collect the data and you build theory from there, right? So I sort of thought, well, I don't believe in ghosts, and I still don't. So I can sort of be detached from this. I could ask, if you see the ghost, oh yes, what happened and that sort of thing. But I was very surprised at my reaction. Two types of reactions. The first one was I was having private thoughts about what really went on. Like, oh, he must have been asleep. Maybe it was a car, a flash of light coming in from the window, that sort of thing. So, and I'm making these assumptions in my mind, which I don't tell people. But I felt dishonest, and I also felt really arrogant, and that here I am, just a rational person, deciding what reality really is, and I didn't like that. So the fact that if I, just sort of attempted to live in these people's worlds, that was much, much better for me, and I was able to go further in my research. Just stop, thinking of logical explanations for what happened, and that was a great discovery. But other than that, I mean, there are people that have seen ghosts only once in their lives, and there are people that have seen them since they were 3 years old and see them all the time and call themselves sensitives, in that they they're able to sense ghosts. If I was a sensitive, I could see a ghost over there, or the former guy that died here or something, and you couldn't, kind of thing. And I said, what's the difference? They say you have to open your mind, and I don't know what that means, but still. Anyway, but a lot of people are very troubled. They're living with ghosts. We had a couple of people, they were living in this house and they felt trapped by a ghost, and eventually, and a lot of people just said, no, I live with a ghost. Basically, yesterday she was in the kitchen and knocked something over and that sort of thing, and they're quite, it's good company for them, kind of thing. So it was nice, but it was fascinating research, and I don't think there haven't been many sociologists that have actually looked at this stuff. But the clash of my own sense of reality and somebody else's reality. When we interview people, we operate under the assumption that you see the same reality as I do, and that's why we can function. When somebody says, and then an angel came down from the ceiling and appeared in a cloud of smoke, and he enveloped this ghost and then went right back through the ceiling, or that, yes, and I was sitting there, and then a man holding his head was walking around, kind of thing. I'm like, wow. Are you for real or what? No, they are. They're not lying to me. They're not making it up. They're quite genuine people. They're also very intelligent, professional people. I talked to a police officer. I talked to a medical doctor. I talked to a nurse. I talked to a journalist. All of these, and they've had experience of ghosts in my life. in their life. Rather, it's amazing. It's amazing. I'm just getting started with it.
Yeah. What made you want to draw awareness? Was it something that you were already familiar with, that people saw ghosts? What made you want to draw awareness to that and put that in the front light and say, hey, this is actually going on?
I think I've always been interested in people who have extraordinary experiences in life. There are people that firmly believe, for example, they've been kidnapped by aliens, or that aliens are controlling their mind, or aliens are still among us. Mm-hmm. These are fascinating people, and I think we dismiss these people as just a lot of kooks, a lot of crazy people. Like, oh yeah, sure you did, you were drunk, whatever. But that hasn't been. It certainly is not my experience with people who've seen ghosts. There are people that chase Bigfoot, and I think in terms of the universe, we divide it between the real world that you and I live in, and then there is the paranormal world, which is behind the veil and that sort of thing. It also speaks very much to religion, although a lot of people I interviewed weren't particularly religious. Mm-hmm. The idea of the earth and the heaven and then the hell, that kind of thing. Well, mm-hmm. Where do ghosts live? Behind the veil, and they come into the veil. Some of them are stuck on this earth. Mm-hmm. Some don't know they're dead. This is all what people have been telling me. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, doing research slowly right now, analyzing the data because I'm teaching 3 courses. Yeah, it's busy work.
And you still have
No, I was just thinking what you were saying there about that internal sort of this like justifications for why what they're saying isn't real. Mm-hmm. Kind of like I think applies to earlier we were talking about microaggressions and how there's like I feel like when you tell people about them there can always be a lot of debate about whether certain things actually happened or they were perceived a different way.
Oh, those are probably micro. Yeah, exactly. But clearly when somebody says, oh, you're in school. Oh, mm-hmm. That's very nice. Oh, wow. That's a big one.
Right.
And I don't think, and if you also see patterns. I mean, somebody says something once, you think, well, they're weird. But if you have like in 10 years, you've heard this 150 times, it's the same thing over time, mm-hmm. You know where it's coming from.
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
For sure.
Yeah, it's true.
So, just going back, there was something that I was trying to find out, but I couldn't find it out because it only gave me half the tale. It didn't really tell me what it was. So right. I was curious. So I wrote it down anyway as a questionnaire. So I gave you the background of it, my understanding of it, and then maybe if you do remember, we can cover that. And if we don't, we just move on. So back in 2016, you received a grant from a group, and it didn't really specify. I had to do something with like sex work. It was probably one of your research, community research or something. I kind of wanted to know like what was the, what was the grant for, because it wasn't clear at all. And how have you also, continued that particular research? And
well, that was not my grant.
Okay.
I was asked to be on the team of about 20-25 people across Canada to study prostitution, and I mentioned Fran Shaver before. She asked me to come on board.
Gotcha.
The grant was not accepted, and that was a shame. To study safety issues with sex workers. I have had experience with sex workers. As a matter of fact, when I was doing my master's, Fran Shaver was my professor in Concordia University, and she hired me to go out in the streets from 9 p.m. until 3 a.m. to interview prostitutes on the streets. So we would go up to male prostitutes, female prostitutes, and trans prostitutes, and say, "Hello, I'm from Concordia University, and I would like to ask you several questions." As soon as they got to know us, this is in Montreal, they were most happy to talk to us. As soon as they found out we weren't from a church or something, trying to reform them. But that was my experience. So I got to talk to a lot of street prostitutes, and I think that was really a benefit. I mean, I felt very lucky to do so, to find out, to ask them about their lives. But no, I mean, that grant never went through, so which is a shame.
Right, and that's what I was saying, because it just it got cut off. So I said,
exactly.
I mean, you must have found out some very interesting things, with street workers and stuff like that. What were some of the, I mean, maybe you can give us like one or two scenario about the most interesting stuff that you found out doing that studies.
Yeah, I remember.
And was the study conclusive, or did it just get left alone?
It was basically looking at statistics. Mind you, you're going back 30 years, mind you, but, a few things. For example, I found, some very, very smart, educated women who had their bachelors, and they went out every night because they could make a hell of a lot more money doing this way. I found part-time prostitutes that, would consider the street a bank. You know how you make an ATM withdrawal? Well, she said, you'd have somebody, I need $50 tonight. So, go out and turn a trick, get $50, and there you go. And then you can go to the bar and enjoy yourself and everything. Some prostitutes were addicted to heroin. Never found underage one. As for the male prostitutes, a lot of them, were, come across hard times. A lot of them were not, they did not define themselves as gay. Some did, but, they needed the money. And the ones that got the most money on the average were the trans prostitutes.
Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting.
They made the most money.
Yeah, not too much more, but you got, first of all, you got the. Another interesting thing I found, as I remember, is that if you're going to be arrested for prostitution, it's much easier to arrest women for a very obvious reason. They will, Montreal, they'll come up to you and they'll say, "Hey, baby, want a date?" And that kind of thing. Be very aggressive as you're walking by. 12 blocks down and to the left, or the male prostitution area, they would not do that. So basically, they're stand there, then somebody waves them over in the car, and the guy would have to do all the talking. So, they could never, the police could never entrap them that way, because they would have to actually go to somebody and proposition them. But the female prostitutes, they go and they'll proposition you right away, kind of thing.
Right, because
it's interesting.
That's very interesting.
And that affects the arrest records.
Wow.
So, in terms of the gender of sex workers, you would get a very biased picture that most of them are female. Well, no, most who are arrested are female. So yeah, that's one of the things I remember. What were we talking about?
I mean, there's so much. You've lived such a vice life that there is like so much paper trail to find and cover it. But I didn't know that. I didn't know that male prostitute operated vastly differently than female prostitute did, and it's very interesting to me.
Yeah, because they can't go up to you and say, you don't know who is who. Is into same-sex sex. You can simply assume somebody is into opposite-sex sex, right? And if you're not, it's not it's not dangerous to assume that. It might be dangerous to go up to some guy at random and say, "Hey, baby," you might get punched, kind of thing. So they have to be approached rather than do the approaching.
Got it.
A lot of so that was one of the interesting things that I noticed back then.
My question was what the difference is, or why the difference is, but you kind of answered that about just the safety in that sense, and how the norm is still the opposite sex relations, right? So
well, this is why I firmly believe that it should be legal. If it's not legal, then the women will go to areas of the city where the police do not control, and therefore they are prey to any kind of violent act you can imagine. So, legalization will, lead to the safety of sex workers. So that's why I think, and in terms of, I think it's a transaction just as like anybody else, as long as somebody is not coerced into it or anything like that. I mean, I have met women, who are, this is what I do, and I'm not going to do it for a while. I'm working my way through school, and there you go, and they're fully in control of themselves, and I think that's basically the only, legitimate way to be into sex work. But if you're pimped out, or that's not good whatsoever. Seriously.
Okay. So much we've talked about, but there is something that you mentioned when you came in. We asked you a few questions.
Yeah.
I want to go to white privilege. What is white privilege, and what is it like for a white male such as yourself?
Yeah. Well, let me go back 30, 40, 50 years. I heard about racism, and I was raised in Quebec, which is a French English thing that the French English discourse seems to dominate everything. But as growing up, I heard about racism, and I think, geez, this is wrong, this is a shame, but I'm not racist, therefore I don't have to think about it. And this is the way I was for a long time, particularly before I went to school. So I think a lot of people, a lot of white people do sort of still think that way. Oh, well, I would never do that. Certainly not for me. I mean, I have black friends, and all, you're sort of telling yourself. But what you're doing there is you're just putting yourself right outside of the entire system, saying, well, that's what they do, but it's nothing to do with me.
Right.
And that's simply not true. White privilege is something that I have not been aware of probably most of my life, until maybe 45, 50 years old, because I never heard of the concept before. But it is the fact that, this doesn't happen to you. You don't have people saying, oh, you're in school, or good for you, or anything like this. So you don't get, you're not refused service, or anything like this. And I think, first of all, white people have, really a duty within a racist society to be aware of their position in it. And, if you feel that you are basically treated preferentially because you're white, I think it would be nice to speak out because of that as well. But I think awareness. I think also listening. To me, I've heard there's nothing worse than sort of a white guy championing the cause of, you shouldn't be, silencing black people, for example, and speaking out and being the most outraged about racism and that kind of thing. I think white people have a duty to shut up and listen, very much, to the experiences of people of color, to the people who aren't white. I think heterosexuals have a duty to shut up and listen as well, to listen to the experiences of LGBT people, and not sort of, drown out their voices. And and I think as a teacher, sometimes you do have these discussions, and my duty is not to say, well, this is what it's like. Is one thing in the sociology of the body, for example. I mean, I teach about the sociology of hair, a fascinating history of hair, particularly the fascinating history of African American hair. That that women used to straighten it in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s just to fit in.
Right.
And I thought at one point, here I'm a white guy telling people, and some of my students are black women, about their hair, and I don't even have any hair.
Right.
So there we go. So, but what I did was I had, there's a really great student, and he did a wonderful project. So I asked if I could, show his videos. He made a video for me about black hair. So I showed his first, but I can tell you about the history of it, and I can tell you about the theory of this and that, but I can't tell you about what it feels like. And I think people, very often people forget that. There we go.
Yeah. Nice.
So, in a word, shut up and listen to people. That's the that'd be my advice.
It's interesting that you mentioned about the hair, where black women at one point were straightening out the hair. As you can see, yes. Keira just kind of let it flow. She just let it flow. But you're absolutely.
It took me a long time to get to that point. Even just embracing the hair, I totally went through the whole straightening the hair and whatnot thing too.
Yeah. Did you relate to my lecture on that?
I noticed there was one part where you mentioned even just the way the stores are organized with the hair products. Yeah. There's like gajillions of different shampoos and whatever, and then there's a tiny little ethnic hair product section.
Exactly.
Things like that. Yeah, no, I did remember that.
Oh, well,
for sure.
My purpose is fulfilled.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I think that sort of like changes the dialogue, because now you have the standard of beauty. What is beauty?
Right.
And even from before, in order for a black actress to get into a movie, she has to look a certain way. You have to. Yeah. You couldn't be your authentic self.
Yeah.
In this situation.
Even getting a job, I think I was watching a movie, and a secretary was wearing these African-style earrings and
like the big hoops and
big hoops.
Yeah.
Could you be less African?
Right.
Dress more, and then the person didn't know what to say, but obviously it's dress more white, kind of thing.
And that's the standard of the beauty.
Yes, that is the standard. But I have no idea how these things feel. I know how some things feel when it comes to sexual orientation, but and I would not begin to tell people how it feels. I would only listen to people.
Yeah.
Which is why I like interviewing.
Yeah. And that's how you learn.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I remember in your sexualities class, we talked a little bit about where race and sexuality meet. Like you told us about the whole process of colonialization and how that went to the sort of fetishization of certain races, and even the National Geographic thing. Maybe you could tell us a bit about that.
Well, I think it began with Europe going out and colonizing the world, looking at the people who lived in the rest of the world as somehow subhuman. But in terms of black men, there is the myth of supersexuality. All black men have gargantuan penises, and they can just go at it all day. And that kind of thing, and that's been around for the longest time. And it comes out of the days of colonialism, where white people were just sort of very sexualizing black men and black women, or and brown men and brown women. So, I mean, that's been around for a while, and you also see that in sports. Where I think sportscasters are a little bit better these days, but they talk about this guy, he can run so fast, he's not even human, and
right.
And that sort of thing, and that this guy is like an animal, the ones fighting. And the way they talk about, black athletes, even in terms of sexual harassment suits, if a white guy is caught, cheating on his wife, it's the failure of a human being. If a black guy is caught, cheating on his wife, it's the failure of a race. And but again, I think that sportscasters are a little bit more aware of these assumptions they made some days. But, those were so common back then. So I talked about that again. I think that's what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, thank you. I mean, it's so much to learn from these interviews, to get a different perspective, to have these open dialogue and open conversations, because it's a lot of there's just so much of this person says and that person said, and then you get to people like I grew up in like I said, I grew up in Newfoundland. Some of my friends today don't believe the cause and the reason and the things that are going on. They think it's a part of a government plan to win an elections, and it's like, well, let's slow down. Before the election, which is just happening now, let's go back to the 90s. Let's go back, even when you listen to hip-hop music, they told their history through, told their story through that, their frustrations and things like that, and talking about the neighborhood and how they would get terrorized. What about that? There wasn't no election being ran at the time, so it became very interesting. I guess my thing is, how do I even begin to maybe have a conversation with these folks so that they understand that this is not this goes beyond winning an election? Or do I just kind of leave it alone and say,
in terms of the assumptions that people make,
right? In terms of the assumption, like how does one deal with that and still be able to maintain this relationship, making sure that they're like still kind of like healthy, with friends, or just leave it alone and go on? I mean, at what point do we bring it all together and say, all right, we can begin to understand each other, like you mentioned several times about listening.
I mean, I think that's a difficult situation that a lot of people have been in, in that somebody says something which is, really, veiledly racist or veiledly homophobic, or you can tell that it comes from some really, racist kind of assumptions about you. Do you face them right now? Do you actually speak out? Ideally, I think it would be a good idea to speak out, but sometimes it's difficult, particularly if you have if somebody is your friend, or you're meeting your friend's grandmother, and then she says something like, and I Jewed him down, and you could call her on that and say that's a very anti-Semitic thing to say. And it probably is a good idea, and you can do it nicely if you like, but you're going to make your friend feel uncomfortable, kind of thing. And and a lot of us don't want to sort of face it because of family dynamics. I'll never try change Grandpa Joe, so I'll just try and turn a deaf ear and that sort of thing. I hope that answered your question.
No, it does. It does. And then once again,
that's my opinion on it.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of other people would be different, saying, no, damn it, you face it every single time.
Right.
Life often doesn't, lead us down that simple a path, and I admire people that do, but a lot of us, we don't want to alienate your family or anything like this,
Well, I think there's a level of just emotional burden that comes with really acknowledging it every time, because obviously, it gets bigger. Like now we're talking about it, now we're having to address it.
Exactly. What do you do if you're, this is not my situation, I'm just pulling it on my head. What do you do if your brother marries a woman who is just an ignorant racist?
Right.
Well, do you face her with everything, or or you do try and be nice about it, or it's very offensive and that sort of thing. I mean, a lot of situations, I think, if people are, they're complex because they involve family issues and this sort of thing. So a lot of my students tell me they turn a blind eye to their grandfather basically uses the N-word and all this sort of thing. So anyway.
Yeah, that's interesting. Anything from your side?
No, you mentioned another thing just about, we talked a bit about we talked about the idea of the blonde bombshell.
Oh yeah.
We talked about National Geographic and how they, with their images, how they were known as taking pictures of minority women or tribal women or African women topless, but never white women.
Exactly.
So
one of my PowerPoints, if you notice it has a bare-breasted black woman. It is on a postcard, and it was something like, 1912 or something like that, so very early. And it was a postcard that was sent to, I believe, Pablo Picasso, the artist. But here's a bare-breasted black woman in 1912, which is just out of the Victorian era, and it went through the mail. Just opened like that in the mail. And that kind of shocked me, that because if that was a white woman, 8 people would be arrested, including the post, the letter carriers. But there used to be a nickname for National Geographic. Some people used to call it National Pornographic, because when you were 14 years old, you would, these boys would sort of comb through it to find a bare-breasted woman, but it was always a woman of color. Exactly. And, this was okay, but, you would never, ever, ever, ever see a white woman, and you could have. You could show women bathing in Sweden or something like that, but no. Africa, bare-breasted women, great, okay. So there was a bias there, but I think National Geographic eventually realized that, certainly, but that postcard from 1912 approximately, that's shocking because it went through the mail. It wouldn't go through the mail today.
Going back
100 years ago,
going back even back to slavery, way worse things way worse things happened then. They used to make little flyers about who they were hanging that day, and everybody came and gathered around to view and do different things. So I'm going to ask you a very bold question here, and if you can answer it if you want to, or not answer it, that's totally fine. My question: do you think that the white race respect, or at least view, the black people? Do you think that there is? Do you think that there is that respect there for another fellow human being? Do you think that that's how black people are viewed often?
I wouldn't say yes or no, because that would, I don't want to characterize the entire white race.
Gotcha.
However, while I think things are getting better in Europe, Europe is tremendously diverse these days, it has a very, very dark history, the white people, not only white people, but British white people. We are at the top of the pyramid, and, in Africa, they're all primitive there, and you can't even tell, who's male and female. And no, there was absolutely historically no respect whatsoever. Things are much better now. But, particularly with what happened 2 days ago, in
the Capitol Hill,
White House, you see people with these incredibly racist, logos on their T-shirts, and they're white supremacists, and they're proud to be white supremacists. Can you imagine being proud to be a white supremacist? So I think there's a dangerous move towards conservatism these days. But I think, if you ask me, is there more respect over the past 100 years? I would say yes. But we're in a society where we notice race. I noticed you were black right away. I'm sure you noticed I was white right away. But as soon as we stop noticing that, then I think we got a good society. You know, but it's the first thing we notice about people. Why is that? It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, when I found out that you were a gay man, a gay professor,
right,
I got very excited. I was like, I gotta have this interview now.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I was, because there's this thing where, I'm a firm believer in respecting people no matter where they're from,
exactly,
and things like that. So I was, from my part, I think you were here when we were having that discussion. I was like, this is exciting. I know all this stuff. Let me get down to this research now.
Exactly.
Right. I think it's fantastic, and a part of me think that things have gotten better, but we still have that dark history, and some people still have that dark history to their hearts. By the way, you hear those beeps?
Yeah.
Just ignore the beeps.
Okay.
We're moving audio strictly.
No problem.
We still, many of us still carry that dark history with us. And the question is, why is it that with all this information, I can go on Google and find out anything about somebody? Everything I got here came directly from Google. And if it wasn't something here that's true, you can correct me then.
No, it seems to be fine. And I didn't write that chapter you talked about. Yeah. When you write a textbook with somebody, generally they do half the chapters, you do the others, so there we go. But, I don't know. As a gay man, I've seen tremendous progress. We have a long way to go, but nobody looks at me sideways when I have my partner beside me anymore. And I've never had a bad experience at Mount Royal College, or even a microaggression that I can really think of.
That's amazing.
It is amazing.
It'd be nice.
And this is a conservative province as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it'd be nice for her as a black woman as well to walk around one day and be like, hey, you know what? I've been here my whole life, or I've worked with these people my whole life, and I never felt any microaggression, and they never made me feel some type of way, because now we're talking real progress.
Exactly.
Right? It's not just a handful of people saying, I experienced this and I experienced that, but now, and it must be, did you ever think when you were younger, when did you come out, by the way? Like how describe that experience for us, like
age 25. Okay, so let's see.
And this was before you went.
Yeah, it was kind of a long process, that first my closer friends would know, then I started to go into the gay bars and people would see me, and it became more and more eventually, and eventually they knew. But then I met people who were proud to be gay, or thought nothing wrong with it, and I thought, well, geez, this is great, so I went through, about a year of half in the closet, half out of the closet, and you do that for protection. If you're in Kentucky, in a diner in the country, you might butch it up a little bit, for self-preservation, because you never know what people think, down in that area. But in the city, I don't care anymore. I don't tell people I'm gay normally, because I just, it's no longer a declaration, to me. It's part of me.
And and I want you to clarify this to the best of your ability. Mm-hmm. Can we be born gay?
I don't know.
Okay.
I do know that it's I do know that change is, I would say, impossible. For example, a lot of people on the Pray Away the Gay organizations, people say, I'm heterosexual now and I'm dating women and I slept with a woman and it's great. No, you're a gay man who dates women and sleeps with women.
Right.
But, you haven't changed your sexual orientation. I think you've just simply repressed it. I could go out tomorrow and, do anything I want. That doesn't mean, that I'm not gay anymore. really, and it's about time that sort of thing became illegal in society. Sorry, I lost track. What's the question?
No, that's completely fine. I actually want to go back to the army, and how maybe that might have impacted
the army.
Not the army. Maybe like World War One or World War II was not the army. Let's go back to the army.
Right.
So let's go back to World War One. Like when the men were going to war, and there was very little women presence there, and they were kind of Do you think that had any sort of impact, trickle down effect to like what we see now, where legalization, people are coming out of the closet? Did that influence the gay community at all?
Back then, if you're looking at male-only areas, you do have, homosexual behavior, and a lot of times that used to be defined as something called situational homosexuality. In other words, you're amongst men here, so you're going to maybe do this or that, etc. But once you're basically out of that, you don't, right? I think sexuality is not a matter of either or. You are gay or you're straight or you're bisexual. I mean, there are lots of definitions now, and I think basically the millennials and the echo boomers are, they have definitions like I'm flexible, I'm open, I'm bi-curious, I'm queer, I haven't met the right person yet, and back in my days, the only reason I'm gay as opposed to queer is because that's the identity that was attached to me back in the early 70s. But nowadays, people are just finding different labels for anything. I mean, the people say I'm mostly straight, but every now and then I like to blah blah blah. And I think that's wonderful. I think the fluidity of sexual identity is coming out, and people are being open about it. Before, they just used to call people hypocrites. I'm married, but every now and then I just go out secretly and do this, that, and the other. Sexuality is far more complex than an either-or thing. We have incredible variations in the type of people we find are attractive. Some of us like skinny people, some of us like non-skinny people, tall, short, black, white, old, young. Why should male, female have sort of a special category? So I think, I think the ideal situation is, who do you find attractive? And that's, that would be a great way to have to define sexuality. Yeah. But it isn't, because we categorize things so much.
Yeah, I have another question, but I want her to go. Do you have something to follow up with that?
Do you feel like so I think we talked about before how some of the categories are more accepted, like in the LGBT community, and also this tendency to put things in categories and then add all these terms. Like, I think you described it as like a medicalization or
like GLBTIAAPPQQ. I don't even know anymore exactly. Finally, 2S. I think in the beginning, certainly, say 1972 or something. That's about the time I came out. We talked about gays and straights, gays and lesbians, and that was it, And then there were some people bisexual. We never really believed there were bisexuals. There's, a lot of people afraid to admit they're gay, so they say, "Oh, I'm bisexual" or something. But but then the T's came. The transsexuals. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered people, and a lot of people said, "Wait a minute, we don't want the T on our GLB." because that has nothing to do with us. That's all about gender, and it's not about sexual orientation. But the answer is, look, trans people have been part of the gay community for hundreds, 300 or 400 years, and they are discriminated against as well as having, very unique issues of discrimination against them. So, but a lot of people said, no, I'm a masculine man. I don't want any T's in my acronym, or in my abbreviation. No, I mean, there are all kinds of queer people. Some of us are gender neutral, some of us are not. Some of us change our gender, and that's fine. It's a lot of people say, why is that acronym so long? Well, I don't know. I guess we need a word that would encompass the whole thing, and that word is queer. Perhaps that's the best word to use.
And that's like the problem, because sometimes now it's getting to a point where there's so many what you can say, what you cannot say, So I found myself the other day, I was like, what's the best way to address a gay person? Like, what do I,
if a straight person says queer, that is perfectly acceptable.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. But I mean, if it's a man who's gay, you say gay.
Okay.
And, that's fine.
As long as you say it with a smile.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's important.
Always with a smile.
Always with a smile. So I do have when I was younger and back in high school, especially where the history of black people weren't being taught. So a lot of the time I would steal books, and I started to read books and started to become more and more aware of some of the history of slavery and things like that.
I never learned about black people.
Yeah, no, you and I both. So I just stole everything that I could get my hands on, and that's how I got interested in reading. Those are the only thing I would read, by the way. I didn't go venturing out and reading some superhero books.
Exactly.
But the question that I have for you, John Steinbeck,
yes,
novelist, and he's written for years, and he write on, I think at one point his books were banned from American school and were not allowed to touch, so he was kind of like blacklisted because he pointed out specifically the hypocrisy of America from people with mental issues to like gay people. What I want you to kind of, walk back into when and there was way they would talk, even in the movies, you saw a little bit of that where they didn't come out and say, oh yeah, you're queer. They didn't say you were gay. It wasn't direct like that. They would use terms like you're sweet or, all like these.
The loafers.
Right. And can you tell me maybe how that made you feel?
It's emasculating, oh, you're gay, you're limp-wristed, you're a powder puff. Oh, sure, honey, and all this sort of thing. Maybe it was very emasculating. I'm a man. Particularly, somebody started using female names and that sort of thing. It's emasculating. Gay men are men. Perhaps there is such a thing as camp, where you might sort of camp it up and and act amongst ourselves every now and then. But generally, the idea is that if you gay, back in those days, you walked into a gay bar, that you're going to basically find a lot of screaming queens. No, you walk into a gay bar even back then, and you basically find a lot of very normal-looking people. Mm-hmm. With maybe 2 or 3 screaming queens amongst maybe 100 or so. But it's not very nice. I've always hated it. And I don't like that. I don't like that feminization. But there are some gay men that are just naturally feminine, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think they should be who they are completely. And then there's some gay men who are hyper masculine. But just to assume that you're feminine, that you're female, oh, you're gay. Can you do my hair? And shit, can I say shit?
Yes, you can.
All right. Well,
yes, you
shit like that.
Right.
It's basically, God, I would have sworn more if I knew that.
people speak
Yeah.
how they,
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So there we go.
All right, thank you for.
In terms of reading about slavery, I think what's interesting is that Americans try and give their children, an inspiring history about how great America is, right?
Right.
But something I really thought about, Marx once said, all hitherto history is the history of class struggle. Well, you can make an argument that all hitherto history of the United States is the history of racism, and everything that happened in the 400 years of slavery, as well as the century afterwards, and very much today, is the history of race and racism. And people don't realize that. I mean, you ask an American, what was the Civil War about? Oh, it was about states' rights. Yeah, it was about states' rights to have slavery. And that's
right.
They don't know that. They don't know that. Now, I wouldn't put that to the United States as well. I mean, Canada has a lot to answer for as well. A lot of the hitherto history of all hitherto history of Canada is the history of racism as well. The attempted extermination of indigenous people, etc. And I remember reading. There was a documentary I saw a few years ago, and it was called The Book of Negroes.
Yes.
Oh, there we go. Here's this woman. She was treated so badly in the United States, and then she goes up to Nova Scotia. And I thought, damn it, as soon as you get to Canada, you're
in good hands.
No. It's basically she was treated just the same.
Yeah.
So there we go. And that was, I'd love to think of my country as, the best country in the world, but no, we have problems like anybody else. Yeah, so.
Yeah. Is there anything that you kind of left out that you would like to pass on or speak on now? And your final advice and where people can find you and things like that.
I study people who have had experiences with ghosts. If you'd like to, if you've had such experiences, please call me. Don't call me. Email me. I mean, you can find my email. It's Daveline at mtroyal.ca. But if you didn't write that down, you can see it. You can get it at the MRU website, mtroyal.ca.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for tuning in to 18avenuepodcast.com. Just as a quick reminder here, 18avenuepodcast.com is a platform where we talk to people. We learn about the culture. We learn about what they do and the things they're passionate about and get their stories here. Thank you so much. My name is Rico Bottles, and today my very special guest is
David Aveline.
Thank you. Yes, and co-hosting beside me today is
Keira Carter.
Thank you all. We're out.